So I think we are alive and we can start. So let me introduce myself. My name is Mia Mikic. I'm Director of Trade, Investment and Innovation Division of Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific. This is the largest UN arm in the region. And today, we are gathered here together under the Go ESG ASEAN big event that started yesterday and is continuing today. But what really we want to discuss is the business is recovering better and the raising the ambition of business towards sustainable development goals and achieving those goals by 2030. So I don't have much time to make any substantive introduction, but I think for the benefit of audience, we just need to say that the humanity has adopted Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. Now we are in 2020. As we were entering 2020, we were sort of trying to check where we are on the trajectory in terms of achieving Sustainable Development Goals, and the results were not very encouraging. Actually, none of the countries in Asia Pacific was really confidently making much progress. And basically, we were saying that we were all failing to be on a trajectory to achieve the goals by 2030. And so we introduced a decade of accelerated actions towards this goal and target of 2030, just before we entered the goal of pandemic. And so now with the pandemic and with the economic and social impacts that we have registered across the region, we are very much concerned about not only achieving some of the, or not achieving some of the goals, but actually really undoing all the progress that has been made in the first 5 years, or even for some countries in the previous phase of Millennium Development Goals. So obviously, everyone is concerned about it, and there are many sort of events and conversations about what can we do about it. Let me just mention the three major events that happened over the last 10 days. We had ASEAN Summit, where we had leaders speaking and senior officials speaking. We had APEC Leaders Summit as well. And then we had G20 meeting. And in all of this, obviously not with the same emphasis, what was mentioned is the role of the private sector, the role of business, and the fact that we will not make any of the targets if we do not take into account the partnership and collaborations with business. So obviously, we have different, or we may have different ways of how we do it as we go from one country to the next, and we would be really. I think will benefit a lot in the conversations that we have today, where we are hosting an excellent team of executive directors of Global Compact networks in 5 countries in the ASEAN region, and all of these countries are also in APEC. So it is the double sort of emphasis and the task of these. Let me briefly introduce the panelists, and then I will quickly go into the conversation mode. So I think audience might have already noticed that contrary to what is a typical setup of panels, in this one we don't have a panel. We have if I can say, if that is a term, Vonal, where we have actually majority of women panelists. So let me start with introducing Mr. Faroze Nadar, who is the Executive Director of the Global Compact Malaysia network. And then, of course, he is extremely experienced in handling sustainability issues, and he has worked with the Fortune 500 companies in this regard. And we are very much, enthusiastic to be working with Mr. Nadar from the perspective of linking our ESCAP Sustainable Business Network with the network in Malaysia and elsewhere. And then let me move through the rest by the alphabet, if I may. So I'll start alphabet of countries. So I'll start with Miss Josephine Satyono, who is the Executive Director of the Global Compact Network of Indonesia. She has, I'm not going to say how many years of experience in the private sector, but before she became the director of the Global Compact Network of Indonesia, she has been working with a number of companies, but also in the area of community volunteering and so dedicating her time on both of these ends. And he has actually collected quite a few of awards. I think anyone going to Google will be able to find that. Ms. Cynthia Arce from the Philippines is the executive director of the Global Compact Network here. And she is also a development worker with the experience of both public sector and social infrastructure projects, and specializing in communication for development. I think she has also had experience with the UN SDG Action Campaign in Asia and the Pacific. So welcome, Cynthia. And Miss Esther Chang is the Executive Director of the Global Compact Network of Singapore. She has dedicated her career to non-profit sector and has worked for leading healthcare and education organizations, as well as grassroots NGOs in Canada, where she also part of her high-level education, and in Singapore. And then lastly, we have our Tanya Krichtitayawuth from Thailand. Tanya, thank you very much for joining us. We know that you are pressed for time and that you have to leave for a meeting with the Prime Minister. So we will be coming shortly to you. But let me start with a question to Josephine, because as I said, to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, it is very clear that we all have to actually put our efforts together. So can you please tell us about how have companies in Indonesia align their operations to meet or to help the public sector to achievement of the SDGs? Josephine.
Yeah, thank you, Mia, for the question. I will start with the result of the annual Accenture and UN Global Compact CEO study, which is an annual study for 2019. The CEO survey includes more than 1,000 CEOs across 21 industries and 99 countries, and this shows that businesses is positive and sustainability will be more important to the future success of their business. However, there is only 21% of CEO believes business is currently playing a critical role in contributing to the global goals. What they are saying is that business contribution to the global goals is not enough. That is why business needs increased commitment and action to contribute to the global goals. And 71% of the CEOs agree with this. And based on this study, the CEO then called for three actions. Number one is to raise corporate ambition with benchmark of corporate actions for their own business across 17 goals. and help more whole sectors forwards in systems transformation. Now, the UN Global Compact has identified corporate impacts on climate and gender as the tipping points for business to advance their goals. The tipping points are business to identify the corporate impact on climate and gender equality, among others. And CEO acknowledged their industry could play a greater role in mitigating climate change. While progress has been slow, business leaders also recognize gender equality to be a key priority and are taking action on topics like equal pay, gender balance, and women's leadership. And so that is a number one. And number two is to change the way we collectively collaborate with more science-based dialogue, non-competitive partnering, and local action. And number three is to place greater responsibility on business leaders this decade to drive the action and transformation required to double down the private sector contribution. Now, from my point of view, some of the problems in aligning SDGs into businesses are the understanding of how to embed the 10 principles and the SDGs into the core business strategy. And most of the companies, they look at sustainability as part of CSR and they do it in line with the environment. Now, despite that, we have examples where the companies have shown their commitment and also aligned their business strategy to the achievement of the SDGs. For examples, now I will mention APP Sinarmas Sustainability Roadmap Vision 2030 shows that they will continue to seek improvements to produce products with less environmental footprint by reducing production emission and intensity, and they will do it gradually towards 2030. The other example I can mention is the Riau and Dalan Pulp and Paper and the April Group recently launched the April 2030 agenda, committing to net zero emission from land use by applying science-based solution by 2030. And there are more companies that are doing their business in line with SDGs and in line with their business sector.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Josephine,
Thank
for
you.
that. I think we have gotten sort of a first cut on where the companies are paying attention, and it is
Right.
extremely useful to hear that the climate change and the environmental priorities are on top of their list, but also some of the inclusivity elements with respect to the women's empowerment, etc. I'll come back to some of these details later on, but let me go to Thanya now. And Tanya, if you can just related to the first question, also say what are the priorities in Thailand and how your network is coping with this pressure on having to align with the SDGs.
Thank you. In Thailand, as elsewhere, we also put private sector as an essential role to advance the sustainability developments. And we address a couple of things like poverty and inequalities. In Thailand, we have a government to put priority for these two areas. And we work collectively, whether pandemic or not. Now we also understand that the situation for the climate crisis and the climate issues, we also considering that this negative impact also have effect to the economy. So by the concept in Thailand to drive the SDG private sector, they are agree to use the word build back better. As a critical role together within the private sector now, Global Compact Network Thailand, we bring together whereby about 60 companies across the country representing major companies and also the mainstay of the economy in Thailand. Numbers of them already have pledged their commitment to advance the project spanning nearby 1,000 projects, projecting for the next 10 years. This investment is about 1.3 trillion baht, which is about 42 billion US dollar. And they're putting these sustainable development goals as a plan, as an operational plan of their business, that they integrate this work into the practice and have it with this tangible impact into the people. We are now having a government to be the witness with us, with the Prime Minister, and also they sign on agreement of the witness that we need to track this improvement together. But more need to be done. On the business leader, we help to affect the change in the enterprise as a whole supply chain, but we need to get wider in the community. As we raise awareness about the importance of the SDG in Thailand, and everyone in the society have to be aware together. Right now, with the leaders themselves, need better inform about how their company and their business implement to drive the goal commitment together, and also help to remove the barriers together. And this year is a good year, that 2020, we mark the year of action. We set this as an unprecedented time due to COVID-19 and climate crisis and other challenges. This is just a single decade ahead of us, up to the 2030. Then we call that it's time to act now. And many of the problems that we face are driven by the human behaviors by our people, which means, of course, that we can find solutions by changing behavior together. But there must be a sense of urgency in the current environments. So that's why government also called the meeting to reset the national agenda and the action plan toward integrating these SDG action and global goals together.
Mhm. And so, Tanya, you just mentioned also the adoption of the Building Back Better for the companies in Thailand. Does that change also their long term? So the Build Back Better, some in some regard may be interpreted as the short term activities and initiative because it is related to recover from the crisis, right? But do they actually put the longer term perspective on this and keep the elements of sustainability in there?
Yeah, primary is for the human right, because we have many activity just spot on and reboot the campaign of the international standard migrant worker and human right this year. But those gonna be a new set of standard as well as a long term. However, with the company who had pledged the project spending on the next 10 years, we collect those 1,000 projects in the pipeline list. Many of the projects are related to the climate, like reform the energy, reform the digital transformation. And we found that there are many of the projects that has multiple goals because they can create one project, like with using the 5G technology in education that can also apply to multiple of the SDG goals. We
I
see the
see.
project investment for long term. Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you so much. Thank you. And so, if whenever you need to leave, please leave. But if you stay along, we will come back to you with further questions. Let me go
Thank you so much.
to Faroze now, if I may. We mentioned COVID and the crisis and the issues. Obviously are very well known in the business sector. The demand has fallen because people just don't have income, and so many of the businesses are actually really hurting, and they're not able to get the revenues as they used to. In that situation, when you are hoping, just to survive, how does that affect actually this long-term thinking and long-term alignment with sustainable goals? And does it weaken the commitment of the companies, or do they actually think, as we are trying to discuss with everyone from the UN position, is that the recovery and the future sustainable development will not be possible unless we reset everything at the level of sustainable development principles? What is the
Thank you.
situation in Malaysia?
Right. Thank you, Mia. No, first, I just want to start out saying it's nice being the only guy in the room. I need to do this more often. No, I think you brought up a very interesting question in terms of how do businesses see this recovery, when they're hard pressed for financial resources. Well, at least in the Malaysian context, I think the COVID has kind of brought a emotional understanding of what sustainability really is about. People are starting to feel like, oh, if you don't look at social and environmental factors, it's going to affect the economic cycle, and in fact, it's going to hit very hard and very fast. So that awareness is there, and we are seeing more and more discourse around sustainability and sustainable development, especially since the COVID hit. So I think that stickiness is already there, and it will be there for the long term. Now, in terms of the credit crunch, the financial resources, yes, I think it's given. Everybody is facing resource crunch right now. But I think the important thing is that now is the opportunity for us to also reset the narrative of sustainability. I think for a long time we've kind of siloed sustainability to be a very specialist agenda in corporates. But I think now is the opportunity to say that sustainability actually is broad-based. It's time to mainstream it to more narratives, like for example, resilience, talking about efficiency. I know you're talking about reshaping innovations. So everything that a company can do to survive can also contribute for it in terms of sustainable footprint as well. So I think that this is the opportunity for all of us to also start looking at it from this angle. And we're talking about raising the SDG ambition. Now, if you go and sell that, yeah, you have to create a better world and things like that, I think nobody will disagree. But a nature of a business is to produce products or services that enables them to sell to people and make some profit. And there's nothing wrong with that as well. But it must be done in a more responsible manner. So that narratives has to be cut across to the different decision makers in corporates to say that, look, if you're coming from HR, there is a way for you to contribute to this SDGs. If you're coming from IT, digitalization is a big thrust towards being sustainable as well. So I think it's an opportunity when we talk about the resetting of businesses. How do we take these new narratives and make it a new normal as part of sustainability as well, so everybody can relate and come on board, and together we can drive the ambition.
Excellent. You mentioned many terms: corporate HR, corporate social responsibility, etc., that we easily see functioning very well in large corporations. But in our minds, and often we think that the small and medium-sized enterprises, or even the micro entities, right, have actual problems to understanding how they can align with corporate social responsibility, what it is, and what is actually their position in all of this joint enterprise that we have under sustainable development. So let me turn to Cynthia now, because the Philippines and your own work as well, can give a perfect picture about what is happening in SMEs sector. And so if you can give us the SMEs perspective on this alignment and what the actions can be done and how the Global Compact network can actually help them.
Sure. Thank you, Mia. Indeed, the MSMEs comprise the largest chunk of the enterprise population in the Philippines, and I think it's consistent with the regional data as well. In fact, around 99% are MSMEs. In absolute terms, these are about 1 million small, micro, and medium enterprises. And by the sheer pervasiveness and volume of these types of enterprises, we can already imagine the economic shock that they experienced. In fact, during the height of the lockdown, which was during the first few months of the pandemic, 60% of MSMEs surveyed by UNIDO Philippines, which are mostly located in the capital, have closed down. And it's good that you mentioned that kind of premise where there is a difference between the experience of the MSMEs with the experience of the big businesses, because they are completely facing a different storyline or premise. And in fact, the COVID-19 has put the economy at such a long pause, so that the pandemic was able to expose pre-crisis fragilities and sustainability hotspots that these MSMEs have been facing. So examples of these pre-crisis fragilities and sustainability hotspots would be definitely low liquidity, short-term cash flows, difficulty in accessing finance simply because they are high-risk borrowers. And from the surveys that the UN agencies have also conducted, we know that many of these MSMEs did not have business continuity management plans, something which the big businesses already have. Other sustainability hotspots would include, for example, these MSMEs employing subgroups of the population that already belong to the vulnerable sectors, such as women and youth. So those are some of the challenges that made it much more difficult for the MSMEs to journey through their recovery process, if we are already in the recovery process. So I think if the question is there still a business case for sustainability, especially for the MSMEs, given this time or given that there is still a crisis? The answer to that, the quick answer to that is still yes. COVID-19 has in fact presented itself as a sort of a dress rehearsal for sustainability because all in all, the planet is facing a much bigger crisis in the form of the climate crisis. So definitely COVID-19 serves as, you know, the dress rehearsal, and in a way, it forces businesses along the full range from MSMEs to the biggest ones. It forces them to look at the crisis in a way that it should help them contribute to the acceleration of the SDGs. So in the Philippines, what we have done as Global Compact is that there are just so many entry points. I mean, like, we know that we should base what we do on a multi-sectoral framework already, because that's just the way to go. The crisis is attacking the different sectors from many different directions. So the approach is to go multi-sectoral. And from our end as Global Compact, aside from using a multi-sectoral approach, we also know that there is really a need to place our recovery strategy or our support strategy for these small businesses in a way that the support strategy is much more sustainable. And so with that, what we have recently concluded as part of our response to the COVID-19 crisis is to institutionalize a set or three groups actually of business expert groups that are grouped according to specific thematic areas that different MSMEs are facing at the moment as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. So we were able to mobilize three business expert groups. Their most recent terms of reference really was, you know, to be able to really pin down what are those issues that they are facing, and these are ranging from people-related issues such as decent work, healthcare, even including workforce in the food supply chain. And then there are thematic areas as well around business continuity, around sustainable financing for the MSMEs. And then, of course, there is thematic pillars. There are thematic pillars around circular economy, waste management, because these are all issues that came about because of the COVID-19 crisis. So we concluded the initial discussions of the expert groups last October, and they did in fact come up with what we call a 10 in 10 business ambition document. So it's composed of 10 points that both the MSMEs and the big businesses have committed to do together to support MSMEs in their recovery and resilience journey. So that's what we have to do.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And if I may go to Esther to give us a perspective on the same sector from the Singapore, which is a very different economy from the Philippines. But are the issues similar to the Philippine SME sector, or do you have some additional issues in Singapore? And how is your large corporate sector working with the SMEs?
Thank you, Mia. So maybe I can quickly touch on Faroze's point earlier about the narrative. right? The narrative of sustainability changing, right? And we absolutely see that here in Singapore, and seeing companies taking a broad-based approach, a wider thinking of how sustainability ties into innovation, technology, risk mitigation, business opportunity, investments. So sustainability is no longer kind of sitting as a side, but increasingly becoming a very much integrated part of the business strategy and operations. Now that's we see that in the narrative MNCs, but SMEs are increasingly becoming curious and paying attention and wanting that awareness to upskill themselves. We see that in terms of SMEs coming to GCNS, inquiring about where do we get started, or how do I deepen my sustainability journey. In fact, what Cynthia's highlighted in terms of stats, 99% of all business are SMEs, and also the challenges that they are facing in terms of, difficulty accessing financing, low liquidity, and also perhaps just not being prepared for this crisis that we did not anticipate. All those also ring true for SMEs here in Singapore. And SMEs here in Singapore make up 65% of Singapore's workforce and take up half of the country's GDP. So certainly in our emerging stronger narrative for Singapore, we must bring SME along for this, because they play such a fundamental role and directly affect the livelihood of so many locals. Now, maybe I want to take a point here to look at, maybe offer some perspective of what we think SMEs can do, right? Because we believe that every business, no matter how big or small, must play a role, right, in creating the future we want. And it's really urgent. It may sound extreme, but our existence is actually riding on the actions we take today. Now, when we see more businesses, big and small, because it's all part of a collective value chain, this is when we see the magic of compounding takes off, right? The exponential growth of actions towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And now we have access to great technology and innovation. Let this be an enabler of change and help us scale, right? But business must not kind of associate making change with expensive and complicated technology, right? It requires out-of-the-box thinking. This is a time where COVID has encouraged us to rethink, reimagine, but not everything comes at a huge price, right? So perhaps I can offer an example, right? An example of Kimberly-Clark in Singapore, right? So they've been noticing they are getting increasing feedback from customers that their products are being received in damaged paper box packaging. Now, instead of simply just adding more materials into the paper boxes to make them more durable, they looked at the source of the problem. And what they found that the issue actually came in the transportation method and the way the products are being handled. So they came with a very simple but effective solution, which is adding a little edge border protector to all the boxes. It's simply a small cardboard edge to protect their boxes that they use when stacking, distributing, and delivery. Now, the simplest solution helped the factory save about 500 tons of paper materials per year, and that's equivalent to about 12,000 trees. Now, while Kimberly-Clark is a large MNC, but this is a very cost-effective method, right? So this kind of thinking, out-of-the-box thinking ethos, can certainly be adopted in SMEs and alike. So it doesn't require, a high-tech and costly. Sometimes it's just really kind of looking at the source of the problem and finding different ways to address that issue. So, so this is one action I like to urge, is that for companies to start large and small to start thinking differently, right, about the way they operate and to problem solving. Now, on the question of financing, right, I think SME, Cynthia mentioned a little earlier that it is challenging, but I think many different countries are now looking at sustainable financing, right, as a way to bridge that SDG gap, right? So I think SMEs need to take this opportunity, working together with, organizations like a Global Compact and many different resources to help them prepare themselves for the availability of financing for the SDGs. Here I can also give an example from Singapore. Choose Agriculture. It's a major egg producer in Singapore. They recently secured Singapore's first SME sustainability-linked loan with DBS. Now, this loan was evaluated based on a series of environmental, social, and governance performance metrics. So they will use the loan to construct a new farm with larger cage-free facilities so their hens can grow up healthier in more optimal conditions. When they're under this loan, Choose Agriculture will enjoy lower interest rate if they meet the humane farm animal care standards. Now, such standards includes providing livestock access to better nutrition for the chickens, right? Includes appropriate environmental design, responsible planning, and management of the livestock. All this contribute to ultimately more nutritious eggs also for the consumers. So going sustainable there's many empirical cases on why there's clear business case for it. But in addition, there's a lot of positive impact for the end user, the consumers, and also the planet.
Sure. Thank you so much, Esther, for providing these concrete examples. I think these are very instructive for everyone listening and thinking, oh, can this be applied in this case, or how can we actually learn from this? So this is always very useful. I think a couple of words were mentioned in our discussion so far, and I want to use them to make a segue in a slightly different area, which is also related to the big news that was released last week when regional comprehensive economic partnership was signed among ASEAN countries and its dialogue partners, five of them, and this is now constituting the largest trading bloc. And everyone is, while obviously the impacts are to be seen once the agreement is ratified and put into force, but the fact that it has relatively simple and easy to implement rules of origin indicates that it will be easier to reconfigure the existing value chains into the regional sort of context, and that might contribute to increasing the resilience of the value chains that have been put under question in the context of COVID. But my question here is really about the involvement of, on one side, involvement of SMEs in the value chains, because once the SMEs go out of business, etc., it's very difficult for them to get back into the operation. And so when these value chains are reconfigured, if they don't find the appropriate linkages in the country, and the SMEs as a providers of very important services and products are not there, they will just escape from the locality, right? So that's one side of the questions that I would like you to perhaps ponder on. And another one, and Faroze, maybe I can come to you with this one, is how do we, when we talk about sustainability principles, etc., how do we, and we mentioned about integrated approach, etc., but how do we really make sure that the whole supply chain adheres to that? And then, of course, one approach would be to enhance and make more stringent regulation at the final product export destination, so that the traceability is put in place, etc., etc. But how do we make it bottom up, and how do we ensure that the corporations and the parts that are linked into the value chains work together to make it sustainable across the board? Can you give us your views on that?
Thank you. Interesting question. No, I think I would like to take this on by coming by my understanding of a business. No, basically a business is an entity that wants to give a product or service based on demand, right? So to decouple, to be a purist bottom up may be a bit difficult because there must be a demand that it needs to be supplied. So I think this has to be more of an ecosystem perspective. We also cannot discount the responsibilities of larger companies to ensure that the supply chain behaves properly as well. While we want to push the bottom, but the middle guys must also play that part, and also those on top of the pyramid. Now, the RCEP definitely will change how things are being put in place, and especially I think from an ASEAN context, with us being the fourth largest trading bloc in the world, I think it's an opportunity for us to position ASEAN businesses as a sustainable trade entity, right? That if you do business with ASEAN companies, large or small, you are free from all this SDG risk kind of things. I think it's an opportunity for us to place that, but it must come hand in hand with the biggest, medium and small guys as well. Now, one of the ways that we are looking at this in Malaysia is that we are working on while I say that COVID is the emotional push, I believe sustainable finance is going to be the logical pathway to the minds of corporates to move towards becoming more SMEs to becoming more sustainable as well. So what we are doing here in Malaysia is that we are working on a product to offer sustainable financing to SMEs who are identified as sustainable suppliers in supply chains, right? And ensuring, and we're trying to be a bit innovative, working with a few fintechs and banks here that has such progressive appetite, that we need to transfer the risk of borrowing to larger companies, so the cost of borrowing becomes smaller, lesser for SMEs, and therefore they also want to aspire towards becoming more sustainable. Now, this is good for corporates because if your suppliers go out of business, really you also will collapse, because big companies are built on the backs of smaller companies. So I think this ecosystem approach has to be built in consideration with the upcoming changes in trade demands, and even selling into larger blocks like EU and Japan, which is committing towards 2050 targets as well. So everything will be recalibrated. Now, I think a second opportunity for ASEAN from a sustainable finance lies in Islamic financing. When you talk about combination of Indonesia and Malaysia's Islamic financing footprint, we are, if not the biggest, definitely one of the largest Islamic financing entities in the world, right? Malaysia, has launched various large-size sukus. I'm sure Indonesia is the same, and there are many similarities between Islamic financing principles with ESG principles, right? But right now we are treating this thing as two different aspects, right? We need to bring this together for it to be like kind of yin yang, right? So if you are Sharia compliant, you should also be ESG compliant, and vice versa. So that will play out with each other and create a larger appetite pool for both large and companies to come on board as well. So I think the ecosystem has to be built from the sustainable financing perspective, the sustainable procurement perspective, and the sustainable producers from the small and mid-size.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I think I'm looking at the clock here, and so in the interest of answering some of the questions that we are receiving from the viewers, let me move to those and try to incorporate them in the rest of the time that we have for this conversation. The one, and I can call upon some of you, but then if you want to add to the discussion, please signal, and I will call upon the rest of you. But maybe Josephine, if I can go back to you, there is a question on the collaboration and the importance of collaboration in achieving what Faroze was talking now about, the integrated and the way and putting all things together. So what are the barriers? What are the barriers to collaboration between different parties and agencies that need to be working together? And what is your experience in that? And how what is your advice how to go with that forward?
Thank you, Mia. Yeah, we're talking about collaboration as a very important aspect. I will just take Indonesia for an example. You know, we have a very big archipelago, from central government to the sub-national government. Okay, how to bring in the same language together in terms of the implementation, for instance, of the SDGs. When some of the sub-national still talking about MDGs. So I believe, you know, we need to strengthen the collaboration from private sector, from businesses, from government to be in together and talk the same language. Uh, there are so many things to do, but when we talk about, you know, uh, how you invest your time, how you invest your money in something that is overlapping, right? So I give you an example. For an instance, how to um, communicate the UNGPs, business and human rights. For Indonesia, when we talk about business and human rights, businesses are still reluctant to doing so because they connected it with the history of Indonesia about politics, missing people. When actually, you know, business and human rights is how we build business to be responsible business, right? So, and the word is now talking about human rights due diligence. Even they talk about legally binding instruments. When the level of understanding about UNGPs is not the same. And Indonesia is just in the started period, where compared to the you know European countries, for an instance, they are talking about already human rights due diligence. For companies in Indonesia doing human rights due diligence, they say the investment is too big. I would rather put it into the community rather than putting into the human rights due diligence. And you know, there are about 56,000 large corporations in Indonesia. We need to socialize, um, do awareness raising to the businesses. And if we don't pull in together all the resources, it will take like 56 years to do the socialization to the company. So I will think in order for us to collaborate, we need to scale up, volumize together to get the meaningful impact. Number two, skilling up. How we do train the trainers, how we make multiply the trainers to the provincial levels, not just centralized in the capital city, and synchronize. That's what we call the 3S that we need to do in terms of collaboration.
Very good. Thank you very much. I really like this last thing that you said about Triple S. This is really good. Anyone else want to chip in on the collaboration, perhaps
Maybe
from Singapore? Yeah. Okay.
sure, yeah. If I may, they were touched on both by Faroze on the financing and also on the upskilling, which for us is around the human capital. So these are two major fronts where we see there's opportunity for us to really address to help increase collaboration and ultimately scale sustainable impact. Now we know, according to the UN, there is about 3.3 to 4.5 trillion USD that's needed to mobilize annually in order for us to meet the 2030 agenda. And at the rate we're currently going, there is a significant funding deficit. So in developing countries, it's around 2.5 trillion. Now, sustainable finance instruments are key drivers for this transition to low carbon economy and achieving SDGs. We really need to bring everybody on board for this. Now, first, I want to suggest that regulators, right, they can play a very important role in providing the structure for such a transition, right, for providing standardization, frameworks, taxonomy that give guidance on what qualifies as ESG investing. I think we hear again and again from both investors and corporate side that this space is fuzzy and more standardization would be certainly helpful. Now, GCNS recently had a CEO roundtable on sustainable finance, and it showed that pricing sustainable instruments adequately still remains a challenge. So capital rules need to have heavier weightage to factor in sustainability components stronger, and pricing incentives were provided by the government can really help that bridge that gap. So we also encourage in terms of collaboration between Global Compact, local networks, trade association, chambers to really come together, right? To have more of these dialogues, to hear from different actors, what are the challenges that they are facing, and for companies amid in this transition, the board really has to play a critical role in setting that directive on reimagining the business model and to be looking at the ESG considerations very seriously. Now, second, around human capital. In this global transition to a more sustainable world, global human capital is really crucial, and that ties into Josie's point about upscaling and raising the awareness and the capability, right, in taking on jobs that are sustainability related or inspiring change within their companies. In Singapore, the Ministry for Sustainability Environment has projected that over the next decade, right, 55 new jobs will be created related to sustainability. So this is sending a very, very strong signals, both for companies but individual alike, that transition is happening, and there is a great business and personal development opportunities that lies in this transition. So I think that's all I will say for these two. I think the two aspects of financing and human capital needs to be addressed for further collaboration.
I think this is excellent. I think, what, Esther, what you were bringing in here through the human capital building perspective is very important actually to take notice of, right? Because in the situation where COVID has depleted employment to such an extent, right? Everyone is reluctant to perhaps look into the sustainability, thinking that this would cut the jobs even further. But if we are able to communicate the message that that aligning with sustainable development actually may mean more jobs, but different jobs, of course, then it would go a long way also to, I think, enable small and medium-sized enterprises to find their space in the whole in this journey. I wanted to ask about when we talk about collaboration, and I am very much aware of the time, and I got a reminder now. But about the collaboration, you are sitting in the global compact networks in your countries, and you just talked about the importance to collaborate with not only, of course, different type of businesses that you work with, but also your regulators, board of investment, different trade association, etc. But how is the collaboration among yourselves? And are you trying to actually come up with a common sort of position where it's possible? Because obviously every country is different and situations are different. But are there some common sort of areas where the single message can be passed to those that have to hear it, whether they are on the public sector side or the private sector side? Who is volunteered to speak about that?
I can start.
Okay, Cynthia.
I can give a few words. It's already 2:54.
Yes.
But yes, in terms of the common points or a common agenda across the different local networks in the ASEAN, we definitely have agreed that SME sustainability should be a priority, even if we do have differing, let's say, conditions that would pose specific challenges to our respective SMEs. The way to go is really still supporting SME sustainability, because I think we are basically united with the premise that it's not an option for big businesses or for all the range of businesses comprising the SDG landscape. It's not just a matter of integrating sustainability within your operations, but making sure that sustainability should be ingrained across the value chain. So that's the basic premise where we are working on. And well, to my colleagues, you just add or correct me if I'm wrong. But definitely that's the direction that we are looking at. We also are sharing information and experiences in terms of taking off from a government, private sector, civil society, and development organizations nexus in terms of how these different players can collaborate and support each other in terms of pursuing the sustainable development agenda overall. But since we are looking at supporting SME sustainability in general, then this is definitely a nexus that we would really want to leverage on. I know that from the different initiatives of the different local networks, there are already experiences that we can share. In the case of the Philippines, when we launched the expert group discussions, groups rather, we involved the Ministry of Trade and Industry and also the Socioeconomic Planning Ministry, and then we involved the SME sub-working group, or working group rather, within the UN system. And we involved some of the national non-government organizations rather that are looking into supporting as well the SMEs. So that's how we were able to develop the 10 in 10 business ambition that was a result of the expert business group discussions. And we've been exchanging notes, and I think a lot of us did several already, sustainability summits, and I think Faroze is capping it off with Go ESG, and definitely we're going back, regrouping, and then sharing as well what are the lessons learned, and then re-strategizing again, because 2021 is going to be a different year. But for my colleagues, just add.
Yeah.
Well,
Happy to add on to Cynthia's
yes,
point as well. No?
I will definitely let you do that,
Yeah.
because that will be the closing of what of our conversation, because we have run out of time. So in 1 minute that you have, can you please add to what Cynthia was saying, and try to pack in also your last message
Yeah.
from this conversation to the Asian business?
Yep. So to your point of our ASEAN networks, these collaborations. So there's 6 ASEAN networks in ASEAN, 6 networks in ASEAN, right? And how we are working. I think there are many ways that we are coming together to work together. One is, of course, through this kind of discourses and sharing our best practices and among us. We are also having an SDG Ambition Accelerator program, which is an ASEAN track.
Yeah.
So our ASEAN members and corporates are coming together, combining to go through this process, in which we feel will have better networking and cross-sharing of ideas between ASEAN companies as well. However, I also believe that we as an ASEAN bloc, we have a unique position that in our ASEAN bloc we've got economies who have developed and developing. So we can be like a bit of a microcosm to test how do you combine these different maturity levels of economies and businesses to come together for this common SDG agenda and raise this ambition together in the decade of action they were talking about. I think the opportunities are there. We are exploring this, and I'm sure next year when we come back together, we'll have a very concrete way to tell you how we've come together to push this through as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Faroze. Which one of you ladies will come next, Esther or Josephine? Esther, and I'll close with Josephine then.
Do you mean to speak about collaboration?
No,
Yes,
if you want to
closing.
say your last message, what would be based on this conversation to the ASEAN business in 10 seconds.
Okay, all right. Well, we are less than a decade left to meet the SDGs, so really encourage everybody to take action. And to quote a Chinese proverb, which is, they ask when is the best time to plant a durian tree. This is 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. So great resources are available. There is a great will, I think, among different parties to collaborate and partner to collectively find an solution to our existential crisis. So let's do something.
Thank you so much, and Josephine, to you.
Thank you, Mia. I believe peace and stability of the region. Collaboration within ASEAN business for sustainability by addressing together the issues that we are facing right now: climate, labor, women, children trafficking, human rights on the ocean, seafarers, ending waste into the ocean, and corruption. I think that what we need to strengthen.
All right. So
Thank you.
basically, you have listed all these priorities, and everyone can find something that they can
Yes.
actually focus on and contribute. And so,
Yeah.
by doing that and going broad base, we will have it covered, right? So I'm sorry, we have run out of time, so we can't. I know we have. I think if we are let to continue, we have so many other things that we can talk about. But sometimes it's actually necessary to really go and act, right, and do as we talk. So I will let you go and do exactly that, and turn back to your other obligations. But thank you very much for contributing. I think what is really clearly understood is that the Asian business is up to the task, and that in your good hands, in as you are working with various various type of businesses, small, micro, large, etc. You actually can help them to find a way how to align with the sustainable business goals, and how to stay on track in that context. And obviously there will be bumps on the road in the next decade. We are still not out of the pandemic. There will be many other challenges related to that particular thing, and to the spillovers of the economic crisis that many countries are now really going into, and facing the challenges out of that. So we will rely on collaboration among ourselves, and in that context, I would like to invite you all to the meeting of ESCAP Sustainable Business Network that is happening tomorrow afternoon. And so, if you can join. It's online, of course, as all these other things are. We will much welcome your presence and your views shared in the discussions. So thank you very much to the organizers. This is really a great honor for ESCAP to be part of this conversation, and we hope to continue. Be one active collaborator with the Asian Global Compact networks. So with that, we will log, or at least I will log off. And thank you very much for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank
Take
you
care.
so much.
Bye bye.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Bye.